Yeah, thank you very much. And it's good afternoon, isn't it? Good afternoon, good evening here. So it's a pleasure to meet you all, guys, and say myself and Paul have a good connection through Rugby Canada. And I suppose my experience certainly during lockdown was I did some CPD work with GB Wheelchair Rugby after a session at Bisham Abbey, which was a an English Institute of Sport kind of venue, and that was probably one of the last times that the coaches got together as a group in terms of being physically together. And then the CPD workshops online and build up to Tokyo, what was 2021, the year after it's supposed to be, was some three themes which I've sent to Paul, and then a theme which the coaches chose. And what the final one was, I said, what would you really want to know more about? And they did a couple of things. One was unconscious bias, and the other one was about reflective practice. So it's kind of like a menu that we developed together, but also a menu which they chose. So I'm able to reflect upon my experience with GB Wiltshire Rugby from being with them, a lot of work with them. We've just been part of a new coach development program. So they used to do level one, level two, and then it finished. And so you imagine that the Olympic champions at the time, if you're in that coaching space, can only get as far as level two. So it's been pushing that to try and extend those coaches. So if there's anything that I can share that will be helpful, please reach out. I don't want it to be a kind of one-way conversation. I want it to be as much as you want to learn from today as I can provide. Okay, so um, yeah, so if you can just, I suppose, just by way of introduction, I've introduced myself and Paul. So Byron, Patrick, Trevor, and Carrie, if you can just give me a little bit of background, and then we'll go into the session today. So Byron, do you want to just fire off, start us off?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Richard. I'm a longtime wheelchair rugby athlete, and up until recently, I've been assistant coach with the BC provincial team, and now I'm co-head coaching uh, with the provincial team. And I've also been really involved at the club level, starting some junior programming and also running for quite a long time the Vancouver Club, but now more recently the Victoria Club. So that's out in British Columbia on the west coast of Canada.
Okay, thank you. I've been to BC, Vancouver Island. Went
Nice.
whale watching. Just about saw one.
You'll have to come back because
Yeah, I know.
the whales
That's
are
what we said.
pretty awesome.
Patrick, do you want to just give us an intro as well?
Yeah, I'm the former national team head coach for wheelchair rugby. So I was coaching the team in Paris last summer and in Tokyo 2021. We actually played GB first game of that tournament. Uh, I'm now the Quebec provincial team coach. And I just recently took over position as a coaches development lead at Parasport Quebec. My mandate will be very similar to what you described, where there's only so many layers of formal coaching education programs in Quebec and across Canada. My mandate is to figure out how to surrender coaches and create the environment for lifelong learning. So I'm going to be very interested into today's presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. And Trevor?
Yeah, so I played on a national team for 2 decades and coached the BC provincial team, and then yeah, just recently was hired as the head coach for Wheelchair Rugby Canada. So looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Thank you. And to all of you, I'm not sharing trade secrets, with what my experience. It's sharing knowledge. So I'm not giving you any tactical information. Not that I know anything tactical.
What? Okay, I'm just gonna sign off because what the heck? We want the trade secrets here. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, I will give you something that was super helpful for players and coaches, and it's absolutely something that really for them was a game changer. I'm happy to share that. No problem. And Carrie, good evening or good afternoon.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. My name's Carrie Vellier. I was a referee before I signed on or came on with wheelchair rugby. I was a national referee with basketball and a national referee with soccer. I decided to part ways with soccer to find something new to referee. I was a referee for over 35 years. I won't say exactly how old I am. For over 35 years. And I wanted to try something new. And in 2012, when I was at the Olympics for basketball, I was supposed to be part of the wheelchair rugby program at the Olympics. That's what the Paralympics, but I got unfortunately taken off of that tournament and put on to a different tournament. And I said, someday I'm going to come back and do this. This looks like an amazing sport to be part of. And so here I am in my twilight years as a referee, learning a new sport, learning the culture, which is a fantastic culture, fantastic organization to be part of. And I'm so excited to be doing this and learning it. So whatever I can learn, I'm trying to pick it up as much as I can because I'm just having so much fun with it. And yes, that is possible. Referees do have fun when we're refereeing. I know it's our stern faces and we're working our signals, but I really, really enjoy refereeing and this sport. So thank you for letting me be part of this today.
Well, fantastic. Well, look, I want this to say be a conversation rather than not that I do it kind of, as Paul would probably highlight, I don't do traditional lectures in their broadest sense. So yes, there's slides, but there's also conversation, and please, don't be frightened to ask, dig deeper. And I think that the thing that I've always found valuable is when we share stories of learning, and also that we talk about context. So there's an example which I'll give you today, which is ironically from professional cycling, which is where my work is at the moment. So it's about how does these slides fit into the environment you're in. It mustn't be detached from your sport. Got to be actually context driven. So that's where I share the kind of coach-led work and athlete-led work with GB. Okay, so right, so far hopefully this will start the slides on. One may ask, are you able to put the slides up, or I might be able to do it here? Let's have a look here. Has this come up now? Is that okay?
Yeah, they're up there.
One of my students during lockdown said to me, I was born in the wrong era because I was so poor at IT. Anyway, okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a challenge to start with. And so I don't know if you can see that. Can you say what has 4, sometimes has 5, sometimes has 9, always has 6, and never has 5? And I'll explain the purpose of this, give you a couple of minutes. Happy for you to say, Richard, we don't know. As soon as you know what it is, just shout it out. The only thing I would say to you, because I want you to problem solve, is that the answer's right in front of you. I won't spend too long on it. I'll leave you that slide to use with your colleagues and friends. It's a statement. So what has 4 letters, sometimes has 9 letters, always has 6 letters, and never has 5 letters. So that's why there's not a question mark at the end of the sentence. Now, Why have I put that there? Multiple reasons really, because I want to reflect in terms of a learning environment that I very much look at the session of how I start coaching is always around something different, a fire starter where I get them to play a game where there's some free play, there's some challenge, some tasks set to the group, where the narrative of that opening and learning is the problem solving. And then we get a culture, and Carrie talks about culture, and Paul mentioned about culture as well. What's the culture? And I want it to be athlete, co-created, and also because I want to see if this was the point, Byron, to your point, was where we did the GB work, was match reviews, even training session reviews were player led. So they put a video of a previous match or a session, and it would be, what do you notice? And what happened from that was that the bias of a coach saying look for was not there within their lens. They looked completely open, and because they weren't told to look for specific things, it allowed them a very broad view on what's happening. And so what ended up happening with pre-training session planning, post-match reflections, was very much around, in terms of learning, was encouraging athletes to look for things that were not ones the coach wanted them to find. So when I show this to a group of students, the one person who noticed it, I'm not going to say can you, because we are limited on time, appreciate that. When you look at this sentence, the one student who knew the answer said there was no question mark at the end of the sentence. And when I talk about learning, I want to give an environment where you kind of influence that lens. So you kind of direct them towards it. So player-led is get them to look at problems, whatever age, whatever level, and whatever ability. I think there's a feeling that as we become more experienced, we can offer that observation to more experienced players. But I never do that. Whatever age, whatever level of experience, they will always see something that others don't. And also those habits of co-created observational learning become part of, say, carry that culture. And that's, I'm not going to keep on going back to GB, but let's just give an example. Very, very powerful. Coach becomes a conductor of an orchestra rather than one who is kind of, telling them what to do. So that was very, very powerful.
Richard, you just would want to mute there, which is probably not your fault.
Is that better?
There you go. Yeah, there you
sorry,
go.
Sorry. Okay, so one of the significant things that I have found is for me to look at how I learned, to understand a more relatedness, to be more create more sessions that are more related to the learn. Okay, so can anybody pick any of those three images and just recap if they can remember how they learned to read, tie the shoelaces, or drive a car, or anything that you think is something that is very profound in your learning? I'll give you a kind of bit more of a direction to that question. Can anybody remember their very first driving lesson? Or can remember the literacy challenge that they had?
Yeah, I mean, my first driving lesson, I was terrified. I wasn't very confident at all. And I think it was it was right before my injury, so I was an AB, and it was with a complete stranger and a bit of a shy kid. So yeah, I was just kind of a bit scared and just trying my best.
Okay. And did your instructor? How was your instructor? Is he the person you would say standout instructor because he tapped into that the feelings that you had?
It's tough to remember. I'm sure, they'd probably been an instructor for a long time and had seen the gambit when it came to nervous teenagers. But from what I remember, it was a good environment.
Right. Was anybody just consumed by a credible volume of information in that first lesson? That was my memory. Just mirror, signal, maneuver, brake, steering wheel, all these things.
Yeah, it was very overwhelming, right? All the different aspects of trying to drive, right? Just trying to get comfortable with just the physical, like how you like turn the wheel and all that stuff, and then also all the information, like all the rules of the road as well. So
Yeah. And it's all consumed, particularly with driving. It's got that scariness of the open road and the consequences of getting it wrong. I'm not sure if you're able to do this, but if can you know how they teach reading in schools now? It was a learning moment for me as a parent, for my learning
so
experience.
my little guy is 5.5 and is kind of halfway through kindergarten right now, and he's learning how to read at the moment, but I'm not really sure how they're teaching it at school right now.
I mean, it's a random question. I'll just give you an example. My daughter sang the alphabet beautifully, A to Z. It was a celebration, and it's pointless. As my bubble always burst because it's just a repeat of letters in an order of which gives no context, no learning. So what they do now is they give them 3 letters, make a word, and add another letter, make as many words with 4 letters, and they introduce letters into those existing 3, 4, and 5, then to establish how you build words, how you spell. So the letter has a purpose rather than just part of a rhythm. So when we're coaching, the layering of skills that we introduced has got a purpose. I wouldn't say what would be the first thing that I might teach somebody in wheelchair rugby. I wouldn't know what the first thing would be, but what's the first layer and what's the second layer and how one relates to 2 that relates to 3. I'm probably telling you things you already know, but this layering of learning is at all levels. When you introduce something new, so I think Kitty's first letters were CAB, cab or cat, 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 and then the next letter was designed to then link what had been done before to what was to come. And that's how we do. That's how I coach. If I introduce something new, it links, it's attached to what's come before. So the concept which I developed with in football, soccer, with what's called the Fulham experiment and Villarreal in Spain, was where we talked of a concept of a warm-up being attachment and detachment. So the warm-up content will be directly linked, attached to what's to follow. So this is really crucial in just that opening piece, that warm-up is the attachment we have. So you start the story of the session in the warm-up.
So yeah, so if you're warming up for a practice session, and as a coach, you have a very specific plan for that practice session, like let's say you're working on your passing, you'll tailor the warm up like with passing in mind, sort of thing. Is that what you're getting at there, Richard?
Absolutely, because what you do in that attachment piece is the first bit tells you the skill level, and it gives them clues that, and then you can reflect back on it. So when you look in the main body of the session, the end of it, you say, right, can you remember what the warm-up? Can you remember why we did in this warm-up? Can you remember what we focused on? And that link between the warm-up and the main body is very, very important, because what you're doing is just sowing the seed of the main session. It's linking. And so you're giving a film trailer, if you like, to the film that's to follow. This is why one of the things that I've been successfully able to influence coaches here is that the warm-up for them was just a physiological warm-up, which it is, but it's also a cognitive warm-up and a skill warm-up.
So with that in mind, Richard, sorry to jump
no,
in.
no, don't apologize.
Would you have you seen a team that has a different warm-up depending on who they're going to play? Like, so game time warm-up, would they have a different structure to it if they're playing team A versus team B, where they're going to have to use different strategies against each team? Like, so they would dramatically change the warm-up to focus on the strategies that they're going to need to implement versus team A.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm going to do a slide. I mean, there's a lot of slides to get through, and if we skip things, it's to get to the point, Brian, which you've mentioned, which is this critical piece of retention and retrieval, which if you've seen the slides, I'll explain how I use that in professional cycling, and it's by Doug Lemov. I've related his trigger of how we become successful learners to this period of retention and retrieval. And Byron, it's exactly what you say, is we're playing this team today. The warm-up is to reconnect with the conversations, the practice sessions that we've had to come against this team. Absolutely. So you're always making this link. Nothing is irrelevant. I mean, Paul will tell you I do quite a lot of play, do lots of play in my work. Although that may not relate to the session, it's very much included as a way of connecting sometimes. It's just to get people emotionally connected, emotionally charged, lifted, come from work. It's when you see that the mood needs to be a little bit lifted. People are a little bit tired. The journey there was tough. They may be physically tired, they may be mentally tired. So we can use play to lift that. But other warm-ups are very much about kickstarting the physical and mental link to what's to follow. So just in terms of the shoelaces, for example, I taught my daughter very quickly because I told her a story. I can't remember what the story was now, but I did tell her the story. But warm-ups can, as you say, begin the narrative of what's to follow. Because, you can coach through storytelling, certainly with children. And you can play performance sport through storytelling as well. Characters in the story, unique things about the story, the main players and yourself. So I've kind of given you a lot there. I hope that gives you kind of some flavor of where I'm at. Let's have a look at the next piece. And if we always remember that whatever level of athlete, whatever sport, they're always somebody who is learning. So if we think about how we learn, then it massive influences as a coach. Okay. Sorry. So Wade Gilbert, don't know if he was there, Paul, when I came over, was he there with you when I was over in Vancouver? So those three pictures, each person experiences the process of learning in a unique way. And the role of the coach is to create the right conditions for a learning experience to occur. So certainly in the UK, I'm sure your experience is, diversity is, a very key part of teaching and learning. It's a great theme. It's a great theme, you know. So we need to be more appreciative of diversity, and that's obviously culture, gender, disability, ethnicity, and so on. However, what I look at is a diversity of educational experiences of those I teach. Really important. Not everybody in my team is a university graduate. Not everybody went to college after school. And as long as I recognize that I need to be agile in presenting information to people, then that gives me what I call learner empathy. So I will present information in a multitude of ways. So one of the examples I've done, which sounds quite random, but my first exercise with my second year students was, we have these pop-up tents, people use them at festivals. And I unpacked the pop-up tent, and their job was to learn how to pack it away, and then teach somebody else. Now, I don't know if you've ever seen these people. People leave them behind at festivals, so they're far too difficult to pop up. People are like, all right, just leave it. It's only $50, you know, keep it. So I made them watch a YouTube video on how to pack it away, because that's the challenge around the teachers, in a YouTube instructional link, there's no dialogue. So they appreciate the skills of the instructor, good and bad. Can't ask questions. And then I made them teach somebody without demonstrating. And so I constrained their learning options to get them to become better at. So because they couldn't demonstrate, for example, they had to be really, really good with words. Really. So it enhanced their vocabulary. It enhanced the diversity of words they used, those implicit and explicit words. And then because they were reflecting upon a YouTube link, they took the good bits from it, and it made them realize where the gaps in good teaching were. So, you know, I'm, as I mentioned before, not very IT savvy. So what it led me to was, and this is particularly around my work within GB wheelchair rugby and visually impaired cricket in the UK, was how close can I get to the experience of the person I'm teaching to understand what they're going through. So my current project is in GB fencing, where the athlete coach to coach, coach to athlete, the athlete and the coach fight. Now, one of the challenges there was that if you've ever watched a fencing contest, you get no visual cues from the emotional expression from the coach because they've got a mask on. So what we then did was we put a GoPro on the coach and a GoPro on the athlete, and they both watched each other. And the one line that came from that first time I did it was, the athlete said, "I see what you mean now." Because they had seen themselves in the way that we had seen them, but it had been greater impact by them actually seeing how they were. And also, from the coach's perspective, they had been able to reflect upon their own performance. So never be frightened to have yourself videoed. It's a really and I'm probably preaching the converted, so I do apologize if this thing you do already, sorry. But you'll hear people say, "Oh, I don't like a photograph of myself. I hate it. I don't like that." No, I don't want to watch myself, you know. And I get that. I think if we look at photographs of ourselves, we love to watch ourselves on video, then we probably should be like a Hollywood actor who likes that, I don't like it. However, by watching ourselves, we will get these what I call ouch moments, where we look at ourselves and go, ouch, I didn't really explain that very well. And I'm looking at the learner, not understanding, not looking at how I presented that information. So good reflective practice is where we actually take ourselves out, watch ourselves, and that way we understand what someone's experience of us as a teacher coach is. And that pivotal moment with the GB fencers, the coach wasn't entirely enamored with the idea, but he had no choice when the athlete said, I see what you mean now. So those really powerful videos, which, and I, again, apologies if if you've seen this in action, but within the GB team, the video is there all the time. So breaks in play, the video editor has already got the video of that previous session for them to look at. So it's session video, session video. So those in-action reflections are much more raw, and we can hold that information than the session finishing and then we reflect on it. So they've got that video all the time. So I look at learning strategies rather than learning styles. Yes, we've got learning styles, but we all will use those learning styles, seeing, hearing, doing, but the volume on those will be turned up greater at certain times. So I mentioned attachment, detachment, and then Byron, hopefully this and all of you, this is my work within cycling. So Doug very kindly sent me a copy of his book. If I'm not selling books, but if you want something, I really enjoyed his book. It's really good. Okay. So when I mentioned about the alphabet and the consumption of information, rules carry in. I don't know if you try coaching rugby, refereeing rugby, and the amount of rules that are continually changing, and you have to have that knowledge, is that the accumulation of information to long-term memory is a skill in learning in anything, language, all our daily instructions. So I've been a bit rude. Are there any questions at all so far that you want to think about your environment, your setting, that I can maybe put in a better context? I'm happy to go through this next one, but please don't be shy in coming forwards. This is absolutely your time, and Paul's got my email address. So if you do need any more information that I can support you with one-to-one conversation, no problem. Please reach out. I'll help you as much as I can with any resources that go outside of the parameters of this time. Okay, so I'll give you an example from sport. So I'm working in professional cycling with a team on the world tour. So they'll be riding the Tour de France this year. They're currently riding these big one-day races in Belgium, what are called the classics, one-day classics. And the sport director said to me at Christmas at the training camp, said, each race, not the week-long race, each day of a race, each one-day race will be, let's just say it's 200 kilometers. Now in that, there'll be hills, corners, hazards, feeding stations. So you've got feeding stations, you need to be aware of them. Bonus sprints, huge amount of information. So he presents the slides, 23 slides, on the morning of the race. So imagine that. You're racing 200 kilometers, you get the whole race plan in the morning. So we simply can't hold that information. So I looked at the principles of learning, I put it into context, and I thought about how this would fit with your work as well. So when I'm coaching and how we learn, we can only consume a certain amount of volume of information. That's the human brain. Unless you are, Rain Man, you can just take all that information. We simply can remember primacy and recency. The first thing you hear, the last thing you hear, something in between. So that 1 to 2, 3 pieces of information, and we can hold that. Now, how can I retain that information? So we want good images. What am I seeing? What am I looking at? A diagram, a picture, or a really good demonstration? It's that modeling. So that link between the words and the images is really powerful. So you're displaying information. So we think about, and I know that you do this already, I'm sure you do, but it's about reminding that. Now, when you look at cues, the next thing is those trigger words that stimulate a response in game time. The cue could be body position, hand position, another teammate. So what are you asking him to look for that triggers a response? So pay attention to, look out for. And when you're on the sidelines, this is again very interesting with the coaches in the rugby, is they, through their limitations, for their physical limitations, can't raise their voice. They couldn't shout from the sidelines. So those breaks, those timeouts were critical for delivering information. So they had to rely upon the players to understand those in-game cues, the ones they gave each other. And the last thing is meaningful, which goes back to your point again, Byron, is everything has got to be related to the end goal. Because we retain things that are meaningful. We don't retain things that are abstract. So how much, how will I present it? How can I start to trigger, give triggers? And how can I make it meaningful to the position I play in, to my teammates, to our game plan, to the opposition? And the next one, the next part again is how receptive we are to that information. So time and timing, a bit like tonight really, is how long can I hold someone's attention for? That now there's no scientific measure of how we can maintain our information. The most receptive we are is between 20 seconds and 3 minutes. That's so the first 20 seconds we are most attentive. The next 3 minutes is when what you do in those 3 minutes captures and develops the mood of the learner. So we really have, and beyond that, we're overloading, we're disengaging active learners who've got a bag of balls in the corner, their teammates, and they want to be doing. So there's a balance between attention and engagement. And that's why I wanted you to think about your learning experiences, both in the sport and out, and think, do you know what? That's the best coach I ever had. That's the best classroom teacher I ever had. Okay, so my sessions are planned with this structure in mind. Okay. And then the next part, and I hope this helps you in developing maybe the sessions where you fill in your particular sport. The next thing is we have to get our learner to interact with that information. So we got to start to get them to question. Because when you're questioning people, we then know what they're paying attention to. So it kind of reinforces that, good, they're looking at the same thing that I'm looking at. Then the prior experience and history and prior experience brings in. Now, Paul told me there's 100 people playing your sport. Is that right, Paul? 100 people? So it's very likely that in your club, you could have a national player and a learner in the same group. I'm not quite sure if that's the case, but certainly over here it was. Very, very common in the UK that if you're in Southampton, you'll have the ex-Olympic player in there with a learner. So what we do with this history prior knowledge is we use the experience of those we coach to share their knowledge. Really, really powerful, because what you do then is you really are co-creating a learning environment. And as we know, I went to I'm going to go off track here. Sorry, Paul, it's not off track, just a little bit diverse, right? I went to a play the other way, maybe sound very theatrical and pretentious, or not. It's called Murder on Trial. So they recreate a murder, an actual trial, and at the end of it, the audience gets a chance to interact with the whole trial. So they get to vote on who it is. Now, we are part of the outcome of that play. Because when we decide if he's guilty or innocent, they replay the end of the court hearing with a narrative of somebody who was given the innocent and somebody who's given the guilty. So all the way through it, we know that we're part of that play. It's the same with your learner. If they know they're part of that learning experience, you have their engagement because they feel a part of it. It's not detached from it. And the questioning is to understand areas of ambiguity, areas of clarity, and areas that we know that's great. That first stage of that delivery of information has taken place. And it's the phrase here I use, how do I know you know?
So Richard, what would be a few things that I could do to create that questioning environment within my team? Like, would it be like requiring each athlete to ask me a question at some point during a drill, or would it be more just like letting them know that, hey, like I'm open to questions, sort of thing?
Yeah, so the questioning could be where you do a simple warm-up, get a game with just say it's the strategy, your game strategy, and you just let them play it out and you stop it. They lead the reflective part before you do. So can you tell me why I've stopped it? Why have I pointed out X? What's our game plan? When you get, and I'm not going to pretend I know tactical part of wheelchair rugby, but let's just say, for example, why did that happen? How would you overcome it? And why did that happen? Would you overcome it? Tell you the gaps in their knowledge. So when the play stops and then you deliver the outcomes, we didn't do this well because, then you're not actually understanding what they understand and what they don't understand. So I'm very fortunate to have been with England men's rugby, and at half time the forwards go off in one room and the backs go off in another room, and that is 100% player led. They look at by that time the analyst has already got pieces cut for the half time. I know it's elite sport, I know it's not possible, but there's still the principle. What did you notice? Remember the question mark at the beginning? What did you notice? Didn't see it. There's no question mark. So you encourage them to become much more observant learners. And then what you as a coach then identifies as what stuck. There's a book called Make Learning Stick, and it's about learning strategies. So let's give you examples. So we've done about these attachment warm-ups. So you do a warm-up that might be, let's just say it's offloads under pressure, or I mean, you've got phenomenal, I'm fortunate to have done, Craig Hunter comes into the uni once a month, once a year, and I've sat in the chair and I'm brilliant at going in a straight line. If only wheelchair rugby was 100 meters straight, I'd be the world champion, but I have to turn and I'm hopeless. Now, if we imagined that our warm-up is based upon some fundamental movement skills, then you've sowed the seed. Then your reflection is, now can you remind me what we did in the warm-up? What were the cues? I'm not trying to pretend I know particular cues about wheelchair rugby, but so that questioning then influences what you do next.
Richard,
Yeah.
in a team sport context, when you're asking those questions, how do you make sure that you're creating the proper learning context for the vast majority, if not all, members of the team? And I'll use your warm-up example, and you're stopping the drill, the play. And why do you think I stop? If my more experienced player is the one that answers first and basically nails it, we're just one step further than the coach stopping and giving the cue. So let's say I'm dealing with 12 athletes. Okay, I got one this time. How do you manage to create the learning environment to get as many as possible, as often as you can, with that same reflexive process for the athletes?
Yeah, really, really good question. And I call these the oxygen stealers. The oxygen stealers are the ones who always answer the questions. So in a big group, we can do what's called social loafing, where we can actually sit at the back and be hidden. So what I do is I will go to everybody at some point at any time and ask them a question. So if I freeze frame something, if I stop a session, I will choose who I go to question. And I'll go to them based upon, so imagine you're the super experienced player. I'll go to the player and say, what was really good about what you saw just then? Can you just tell me? And so you navigate your way around the group knowing that you are able to understand their level of competence, but rather than offer the question to everybody to say why, which means you tend to get the same people. If you direct your questions to particular people, knowing that question is not too complex for them, then that means they're confident. So you're not trying to recreate the worst classroom environment when players go back to school and remember what it's like to be sitting at the back not knowing the answer, and to get the child at the front who knows all the answers, because you navigate your way around the group with appropriate questions for the learner. So don't offer it to everybody. Pick out individuals to appropriate questions based upon their level of performance.
Yeah. So Richard, sorry to jump in.
No,
I think you kind of already answered this question, but how do you avoid when you're asking a specific athlete something, how do you avoid them not being able to answer it and then feeling bad about themselves. So like if I'm asking a question to one of my newer athletes and then they struggle and they don't have an answer, and then maybe they feel like put on the spot, right?
Yeah.
And I think you've already answered it with the appropriate level of question, but is there any other kind of tricks there?
Yeah, definitely. I think we have to be open to our limitations as a coach, just like the fencing, is by saying, do you think there's a better way I could have presented that? How can I, so this learning strategy is saying, okay, person doesn't understand. Why don't we, or do you think if we did small-sided games, would that help you? So asking them how we could better present that information, being really humble about saying, can you help me with this learning? Because then that says, well, and I've often found this, can you just show me that again? Can you point out those cues? Yeah, no problem. Can you recreate that? No problem. Can you remind me? Of course. So what we're doing is we're accepting that the learner is not always going to get what we get. So the classic example is we teach how we learn, not we teach how people learn. And once we understand that, that's a really critical piece, because I know how I learn. I need to see it. I was hopeless during lockdown. I was hopeless because the university put learning online that had no questioning, no interaction. I couldn't go back and ask questions. So what I've got to be able to do is think about my learning strategies, let's go back to what I've got here. How much volume did I give them? What images did I give them? What keywords did I give them? How did that question, how do I know you know? Did I question them? So, for example, we play a game called Bank. And so when I coach it, I say to them, right, the whole group is only allowed one question. So I give them the rules and I go around each person and say, what happens when? Great. And how many? Good. And if, what happens next? And so by doing this, they're telling me what they've remembered and also what they've not remembered. It's understanding that I mean, this is a great question. I wish coaches over here would ask that. I really would wish they'd ask that, because it's effortful, but hugely impactful when we're empathetic to the learner and the diversity of learning. And again, remember history, experience. Why not use those experienced ones to help us deliver to the ones who are novices?
So you talked about, oh, sorry, Richard.
No, go on. Sorry.
You talked about like the video sessions being player led in terms of things, and I guess this goes to you want to create a learning environment and for everyone. And if we're having, I guess, which way do you go about a player led situation where you get away from that player, the players who know the most, the senior player is more taking lead in that, and then you get the players who need more of the learning just being quiet and sitting back and then not taking lead in that. So how would you go about controlling that player led to encourage others to be more vocal in that?
Yeah. Again, a brilliant question. I'll give you two examples. I went to Premiership rugby team a few years ago. Monday morning, they'd lost 36-12 on the Saturday. And the coach at the time, in front of 30 players, because the academy and the 80, the whole squad was there, all 30 players. He showed the video and he said, what went wrong? Well, only 3 people out of the 30 players, I counted it, only 3 people offered answers in that 30. Now, what you had in that classroom was a classroom, no different from an educational classroom. Teacher, 30 students. I went to Birmingham City and the academy players get given, I know it's not always possible, but let's give you 2 examples of how they dealt with it. They're given a computer with the analysis. They get to get into groups of 3, discuss it in groups of 3. People are much more able to offer up their views in a group of 3. They're also much more comfortable in a group of 3 to offer up what they don't know, rather than to put their hand up in front of a group of people and say, I don't know. So same video, small groups, 1 spokesperson. Because you can't avoid talking when you're in a group of 3. Even if your talking involves saying, look, I'm not really sure, can you help me because I'm new to this? The other 2 will wrap around them and help them out as learners.
So if you're running, let's just say I want to run video training or like do video with the program. I want to make sure that everyone's involved.
Yeah.
Since we have a new team, a lot of newer players, would I just then say that, this week these 3 players are running this video? And I could
Yeah.
send out
Yeah.
the video early to those 3 players, and then they could look through it together and then come back and run the video and kind of lead
Absolutely.
it between the 3 of them.
That's really powerful. What we're not doing is we're not handing over everything to the player. We're empowering the player, because when comes the game time, and I don't know if this is experienced with you guys, but I did learn that while the coaches, they don't say anything from the sidelines because they can't be heard, simply because of the noise of the game, the crowd, and the chairs taking, well, and saying stuff. So it's critical that they have to have the autonomy on that pitch. They've got to be empowered. Now, we still, as the experienced coach, know, so we can guide. We're still there. But if you look at the move from novice to the journey to mastery, where we start as a novice to a skillful player, we become more and more redundant as they become more masterful. So we may give 90% at the beginning to a young learner, but by the end of it, we're probably giving 10%. We're creating an environment and we're just fine tuning because we've got experienced players. So I think that's a brilliant thing to do. Review the video, come back, share with us what you see. That's really powerful learning. And, Carrie mentioned culture, which is, I don't think it's an overused word. I think passion is a word overused a lot. I hear it, the Welsh are the most passionate rugby team in the world. Well, I've been with England. I'll tell you, you put an England jersey on, you're as passionate as anybody who plays for their national country, national team. Not disparaging about Wales, for example, but I'm just saying that anybody who puts their national jersey on to represent their country is passionate, hugely passionate. But when I talk about powerful learning, it's because we develop a culture where we recognize the experience of the learner. And there's a culture which what ends up happening is that people are not frightened to suggest. They're not frightened to contribute. You go into a group of primary school children, you say, "You've got an idea." They'll go, "But yeah, I've got an idea. I've got an idea." And it doesn't matter what it is. They're just super excited to share an idea with you.
And they're not
to them, sorry, go on.
sorry, they're not scared to get something wrong either. Because once you have that, and this is me in my learning environment as a referee, if I screw up in front of everybody, I'll quickly say, even though from my history in the past with national basketball and national soccer and even refereeing overseas as well, I'm very protective of my knowledge of it, but because this culture in wheelchair rugby is so accepting, I'm okay to screw it up and say, I am so sorry I screwed that up. We're going to get it right the next time, or wait till you see me next year. I'm dyslexic. So I learn a completely different way than anybody else. Like schooling and a school, that culture is not made for me. That learning environment was not made for me when I was growing up and moving up stages. So I'm that one in the back, even though you see me as the referee and I'm making the calls and I'm just jacked up inside of, oh my God, did I just screw it up? And it takes a lot to feel comfortable to ask those questions and to be okay to get it wrong. So that's quite a thing too. So Trevor, that is an amazing idea that you came up with. That's amazing. And making them feel comfortable. It's okay to get it wrong. We all make mistakes. But I think this is where with wheelchair rugby, I'm okay to get it wrong because I know I'm going to get it right the next time.
Yeah. I mean, Carrie, it's brilliant. You see, what you're doing is reflecting upon the diversity of your learning experiences, the good and the bad. And again, going back to children, is you say you got an idea, they put their hand up and they come this amazing idea, and you say to them, "Oh no, that's not what I was thinking." The likelihood of them coming back to you again is pretty much nil, because the consequences of being shut down can be so scarring to that individual, they don't want to put themselves out there again. So exactly, we talk about that culture of getting it wrong means, hey, that's a good idea. Maybe it's not what we use now, but I like the way you're thinking. I'm really pleased that you've actually tried something different. And that isn't meant to be sugarcoating, sunshine and unicorns. It's a pedagogical fact of how we deal with people as a learner.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Richard, because I think sometimes in the past I've tried to be like I put out the request for questions and feedback or views on like a drill or whatever we were doing, a game, right? A game plan. But I'm requesting viewpoints, but I've already got my mind made up on what I think I'm looking for something in particular. And when I don't get that, I move on fairly quickly to just going back into sharing what I thought we needed to work on. And I think in a way that's shutting down that feedback, right? By not, I'm not in the right, I'm not creating the right environment where I'm respecting that feedback and going with it. So I think, yeah, so I think there's a time and a place to implement what I think we should work on. But then there's also a time and a place in a practice where I'm more open and I take what they're giving me and I run with that more.
Yeah. I mean, it's great to reflect on how we could get better, but also all of us need to remember that the learner comes to us with a prior learning experience, which is their history. So we come to our culture of empowerment, autonomy, and player-led, and they've come from other sports and other learning environments where they've not had that. And so they come into an environment where we're giving them permission to think, permission to act independently, permission to question. So it's a culture when the students come to me at university in year one, and I say, "What do you think?" And they go, "I don't know. I've not had to think for 18 years, like linear education. do this, pass the exam. I said, well, welcome to my world now. You can do what you want, providing it's safe and it's purposeful. I want you to, never say to me, is that okay? I want you to try it. So let's reflect with perspective, but also let's remember where they've come from. A learning environment that is very different than one we're trying to create. So education's got a lot to answer for. Not everywhere. I am a teacher now.
Richard, I'll just move in there. I'm just cautious of time.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
No need to apologise at all. Is there anything you want to finish off with, Richard?
Probably just this last slide.
Yeah.
And then I'm sorry about the time, Paul. I apologise to go over that. But this is the last one. And actually, I thank Byron for kind of triggering this right at the beginning, really, is this retention retrieval piece and this whole pedagogy around learning. So this revisiting is quite a nice strategy. Remember how we learn is let's repeat it because we learn through repetition. Questions and questioning. Understand gives us the gaps in knowledge. I thought you'd got that. No, I didn't understand that. Ah, great. Now you understand what I mean by that. Fantastic. Spacing means that we don't give them everything. We allow them time to absorb it and then come back. So we space new information during a session, during a week, during a season. Because just simply the way the brain computes transfers knowledge from short-term to long-term to repetition, experience, feedback. The immediacy is how much, if I asked you a question on tonight, you should be able to remember hopefully remember quite a high percentage of information. But we know that we don't teach and then immediately recall it all the time. So the delay is recognizing there is a delay. So I'm going to ask you tomorrow, I'm going to ask you the day after. And the last thing, which is really useful phrase, which is called cold calling, is quite useful, quite useful thing to think about this, is where they're warming up, they're having a cup of tea afterwards, and you cold call and you just say things like, oh, can you just remind me what we did last week? So it's not planned, it's literally a cold call. It's like somebody knocking on your door you don't expect. But it's done in such a way that it continues to revisit the learning that we've imparted in training. What did you think about that play? Oh, what did you think? What did you notice? Can you, so there's kind of cold calling is where you just pick on individuals or just in through conversations, just ask people. And the retention and retrieval is literally, how can we get people to hold knowledge and when it's needed at the right time, retrieve it? That's why context, scenarios, purposeful practice, game-like. I did far too many slides, Paul. My God, I'm sorry.
No, not at all. And listen, I think the fact that we're having questions has got people kind of thinking and reflecting on their environment. So much appreciated. I do want to say a thank you to Richard because I know it is the evening over in the UK. But Richard, thank you for taking the time to kind of share your knowledge with us. For those on the call, we do have another couple of sessions with Richard later on in the year. So I'll be sharing those kind of details with you on some kind of different topics, but you'll see that Richard has a wealth of knowledge across multiple sports and multiple levels, both kind of from a practical perspective and his role as a professor as well. But Richard, thank you very much, and thank you very much for everyone on the call. I will share Richard's email, as he said at the start. If anyone's got any kind of questions or looking for further information, I'm sure Richard will be okay kind of responding to those. But thank you everyone for being on this session, and again, thank you very much to Richard. But closing comments from you, Richard, and then we can let everyone enjoy the rest of their day.
Look, I am just so grateful to, first of all, on a personal level, to connect with Paul. Really, really lovely in the time we've known him. Really delighted to meet you guys as well, and just I'm glad that you have joined the call. It's nice to meet you, and I will more than happy to send information. Don't be frightened to write to me. I'm here to share knowledge. There's no inconvenient. And Paul said right at the beginning, I know you're busy. Well, look, I'm never too busy to work in what I'm passionate about. And I've got an article called Retention Retrieval, which I'll send you just as a reflection on this. So, and all of you, again, thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Listen, enjoy the rest of your day. Be safe wherever you are. And Byron, you look like you're going to say something.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you, Richard. Okay. That was great. And I'm really looking forward to a couple more sessions.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.